Hello everyone and welcome to another video here on wooEnglish. Today we need to go through a story, but unfortunately the story we have chosen for you is a rather sad one. We have chosen you the story of not a person but a place, and to be specific of a country. The country we are going to talk about today has a big contrast between its past and its present. The past of this country was so beautiful, unlike its present. It was known for its beautiful scenery, the places, the nature. It was known for its culture, fashion, music, movies. It was even called the Paris of the Middle East. So you can imagine how beautiful this country once was. Unfortunately, today, this country is just a memory of what was once the pearl of the Middle East. We're talking about Lebanon, a place and the people also of Lebanon that have suffered a lot of pain and suffering. Lebanese people have gone through a lot of economic crises, a lot of political crises. Their currency, the money that they have, had lost more than 98% of its value. The capital of this country had an explosion back in 2020. I think a lot of you might remember the explosion that happened in the port, had almost wiped out half of the capital, Beirut. So in addition to all of this suffering, today we see that Lebanon is being bombed by Israel. It's being attacked by Israel in a war between Israel and Hezbollah. So the people of Lebanon, unfortunately, are the ones who are paying the price. So we decided to cover what's going on in Lebanon for two things. First, we would love for you to know and have a better idea, a clearer idea of what's going on. And also, we would love for you to learn some English related to this, to what's going on, so that even when you want to talk about this, you can have the right vocabulary to do so. The vocabulary you are going to see today is a vocabulary, it's a quite negative one, but it's related to sadness, to crises, economic, political crises, and it's a vocabulary of war. You are going to also learn some expressions that express feelings, especially sad, negative feelings. But we are going to try and understand and live through what the Lebanese people have been going through for decades now. We wish the best for the Lebanese people, and we wish that we will be successful in portraying the pain, the suffering that these people have gone through for decades now. Before we go and start listening to the story of Lebanon and the crisis going on in Lebanon, let us kindly remind you that wooEnglish is a channel dedicated to teaching English through stories. So we use topics like the one we are covering today to give some facts and also teach some English. So if you are listening to this, please make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss our future videos. Don't forget, please, to like the video. This is the way to push the video to more and more viewers and for it to be recommended to new people so that they can also get their ideas right, their facts right, and also improve their English. If you want to benefit to the maximum from this video, make sure to listen to it carefully, maybe write down some new words you will encounter, and finally, make sure to participate in the quiz under the video that will help you test your understanding. And of course, this is a B1 story. I think you will see it in the title. It's a B1 to B2 story, meaning it's very suitable for intermediates, but it will also be good and beneficial for beginners and also advanced students. So without further ado, let's go into chapter number 1.
Chapter 1. A Morning in Beirut. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you are walking on a long road by the sea. The sea is on your right. The buildings are on your left. This is the Corniche. This is Beirut, on a morning in April 2026. The water is blue, very blue. The sky is soft and pink. The sun is just starting to rise. A fisherman pulls in his nets. He works in silence. He has done this every morning for 40 years. The city is waking up. You can smell the coffee. You can smell the bread from a small bakery on the corner. A woman walks past you. She is going to work. She holds her phone in one hand, a small paper cup in the other. A car horn breaks the quiet. Then another. Then another. The traffic is starting. In a small square, you hear a new sound. It is the call to prayer from a mosque, soft and slow. And at the same time, you hear bells from a church just across the street. The two sounds meet in the air for a moment. Then they both stop. This is Beirut, a city where the prayer of one is not louder than the prayer of another. At least, not on this street. At least, not on this morning. You walk a little further. A boy passes you on his way to school. He is maybe 9 years old. His backpack is too big for him. He smiles at his mother walking behind him. She smiles back. It is an ordinary morning. You hear the sound of cups and plates inside a small cafe. A grandmother is opening her shop. She lifts the metal door. She makes a soft sound with her tongue to greet the day, to ask God to be kind. She puts out 2 chairs. She wipes the small table. The day is ready. And then you hear something very far away. A sound you cannot name. Not loud. Just there. You look up at the sky. The sky is empty. The sun is higher now. The sea is still blue. The fisherman lifts his head for just a second. Then he looks down again. The woman with the coffee does not stop walking. The boy with the big backpack does not stop walking. The grandmother does not stop wiping her table. Nobody runs. Nobody panics. Nobody asks, "What was that?" Because they already know. In this city, you learn to know that sound. A sound far away. A sound from the south. A sound from the mountains. A sound from the sea. It is the sound of a country at war. And the strange thing, the very Lebanese thing, is this. Life does not stop. The bread is still hot. The coffee is still poured. The children still walk to school. Because if you stop every time you hear that sound, you will never live again. And Lebanon, for 100 years, has chosen to live. Even now, even today, even on this quiet morning in April. This is the country we want to understand. But to understand this morning, we cannot start here. We must go back. Not 5 years. Not 10. We must go back further. To a time when Beirut was called something else. When this city was the heart of the Middle East. When the world came to Lebanon, not to leave it, but to live in it. Let's begin there. Chapter 2. The Paris of the Middle East. In the 1960s, there was a saying about Lebanon. In one day, you could ski in the morning and swim in the sea in the afternoon. It was not a joke. It was true. In the morning, you could drive up into the mountains. You could put on your skis. You could feel the cold snow under your feet. Then you could drive down, only 1 hour, to the warm Mediterranean. You could swim before the sun went down. This was Lebanon, a small country with 2 seasons in one day. A small country with everything inside it. People called Beirut the Paris of the Middle East. Why Paris? Because Beirut was beautiful. Beirut was elegant. Beirut was cosmopolitan, a city of many cultures and many languages. You could hear Arabic in the morning. You could hear French in the afternoon. You could hear English at night. Sometimes all three in the same conversation. The city was diverse. The city was multicultural. And the city was proud of that. Beirut had wide streets, old cafes where writers and poets sat for hours, theaters, music, art, fashion, a university, the American University of Beirut, that was one of the best in the world. But Beirut was not only beautiful. Beirut was a financial capital. Banks from across the Arab world had offices here. Money came in from Saudi Arabia, from Kuwait, from the Gulf. Lebanese banks held billions of dollars in deposits, more than 3 times the size of the country's whole economy. Lebanon was small, but its banks were big. The banks brought stability, or at least, the illusion of stability. Then, in 1975, everything changed. A civil war began. A war between Lebanese people, between religious groups, between political parties, between neighbors. It was not one war. It was many wars at the same time. The civil war lasted 15 years. 15 years of fighting. 15 years of fear. A whole generation grew up knowing nothing else. The Paris of the Middle East was no more. Buildings stood empty, full of holes from bullets and bombs. Hotels became battlefields. Beirut, the elegant city, became a city of ruins. When the war finally ended in 1990, the country was exhausted. But the Lebanese people did not give up. They rebuilt their city. The 1990s and the 2000s were the years of reconstruction. New buildings rose in the center of Beirut. New shops opened. New restaurants opened. The Lebanese diaspora, millions of Lebanese people living in other countries, came back to visit, to invest, to build. It looked like a miracle. But behind the new buildings, the country was already in trouble. The government was borrowing too much money. The banks were paying very high interest rates to attract dollars from outside, higher than any other country in the region. Some economists were worried. They said, "This cannot last forever." But other people said, "Do not worry. Look at the new buildings. Look at the new shops. Lebanon is back." For many years, both sides were right at the same time. The country looked successful from the outside. Money was coming in. Tourists were coming back. Beirut was alive again. But the foundation was cracking, slowly, quietly, year by year. The banks were paying out more than they were earning. The government was spending more than it had. The country was living on borrowed time. And in October 2019, the time ran out. Chapter 3. The money disappeared.
Now that we have gone through chapter number 1 and 2, I would love for you to go down to the comment section and try to write for me either a fact or a word in English that stuck with you, that was very, very interesting for you. It may be an adjective, a verb, a noun, something new that you have just discovered, and I would love for you to even try and use it in a sentence. That way you will never forget this word. On your way up to continue watching the video, don't forget to click that like button, maybe activate that bell icon. These little actions that you can do really help in supporting the channel. So if you like our content, kindly consider clicking that like button. Let's go and watch chapter number 3 and on.
October 2019. The government in Beirut made an announcement. A new tax. A tax on WhatsApp calls. It sounds small. A few cents for every call. But for a country that was already tired, already poor, already in deep debt, it was too much. That night, the streets of Beirut filled with people, and then the streets of Tripoli, and then the streets of every city. The people called it Thara, the revolution. It was not a violent revolution. There were no guns, no fighting, just people in the streets, singing, dancing, shouting, asking for a new country. For a few weeks, there was hope. But then the banks started to close their doors. Let me tell you about a woman. Her name is not important. Let's call her Layla. Layla is a teacher in Beirut. She is 52 years old. She has 2 children, both at university. She worked hard her whole life. She saved her money every month. She put her savings in the bank, most of it in US dollars, because in Lebanon, dollars feel safer than the local currency. By 2019, Layla had nearly $40,000 in her bank. Not a fortune, but enough to help her children finish university, enough to buy medicine for her mother, enough to feel safe at night. Then one morning in November, Layla went to her bank. She wanted to withdraw $2,000. The man behind the desk looked at her. He looked at his computer. Then he looked at her again. "I am sorry," he said. "You cannot take your money today." Layla did not understand. "Why? It is my money." The man said nothing. He just looked down. Layla went back the next day, and the next. The answer was always the same. Not today, not this week, not now. Her deposit was still there, on paper, but she could not touch it. This was happening to everyone. The Lebanese banks were holding billions of dollars that belonged to other people, and they would not give it back. The currency began to collapse. In October 2019, $1 was worth about 1,500 Lebanese lira. 6 months later, 15,000, then 30,000, then 90,000. In total, the Lebanese lira lost more than 98% of its value. 98%. Layla's salary stayed the same on paper, but in real value, every month it was worth less. The price of bread doubled, then tripled, then doubled again. This is called inflation. And in Lebanon, in the worst year, inflation reached 221%. But inflation was not the only problem. The electricity stopped working for most of the day. People called these moments blackouts. In some weeks, there was electricity for only 1 hour. Those who had a little money bought a generator, a small machine that makes electricity at home. But generators need fuel, and there was a shortage of fuel. Long lines of cars waited at every petrol station. Some people waited 10 hours just to buy a few liters. There was a shortage of medicine, a shortage of bread, a shortage of hope. Unemployment rose every year. By 2022, more than 4 out of every 5 Lebanese people were living below the poverty line. Some Lebanese could not wait anymore. A few of them went into their banks carrying weapons, not to steal, but to take out their own money. Money they had earned. Money the bank refused to give them. These people did not go to prison. The Lebanese people called them heroes. Layla never did this. She just kept going to her bank, week after week, year after year. And the answer was always the same. The country was already on its knees. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon in August 2020, the ground itself shook. Chapter 4. 7 seconds in August. August 4th, 2020. It is a Tuesday. A normal afternoon. The sun is bright over the Beirut port. Inside one of the warehouses, Warehouse 12, something is burning. Workers can see the smoke rising into the sky. It is gray at first, then black, then orange. The fire grows quickly. Inside that warehouse, there are 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate is a chemical used to make fertilizer for farms, but it is also extremely dangerous. If it catches fire, it can explode with enormous power. It has been sitting in this warehouse for 6 years. 6 years. Forgotten by the government. Forgotten by everyone. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the port workers call the fire department. At 6:05, the fire trucks arrive. At 7 minutes past 6, there is a first small explosion. Then, 7 seconds of silence. 7 seconds where some people pulled out their phones to film. 7 seconds where some people kept driving. 7 seconds where some people stood at their windows just to see what was happening. 7 seconds where 218 people did not yet know they had only 7 seconds left. Then it happened. The largest non-nuclear explosion of the 21st century. A white shockwave moved across the city in every direction. Windows shattered 5 kilometers away. Cars were pushed across streets. Buildings shook. The roof of the airport, 15 kilometers away, was damaged. In Cyprus, 240 kilometers across the sea, people felt the ground shake. They thought it was an earthquake. A crater 43 meters deep opened where the warehouse had been. The sea rushed in to fill it. When the smoke cleared, half of Beirut was changed forever. 218 people died. 7,000 people were wounded. 300,000 people lost their homes. 300,000. In a few seconds, the destruction was devastating. Hospitals were full of the wounded, and some hospitals were themselves destroyed. Doctors worked through the night, in the dark, using the light from their phones. By the next morning, Beirut was a city of ruins. Streets full of rubble. Cars on top of cars. Glass on every road. Children walked home, looking for their parents. Parents walked the streets, looking for their children. Some never found them. The whole country was in mourning. The world watched on television. Money came in from many countries to help. Aid teams arrived from France, from Italy, from the Gulf. The Lebanese people did what they always do. They cleaned the streets themselves, with brooms, with their own hands. Survivors and volunteers working together for weeks. And then came the second tragedy. The question that had no answer. Who was responsible? How did 2,750 tons of explosive chemicals sit at the port of a capital city for 6 years? Who knew about it? Who decided to ignore it? A judge was given the case. His name was Fadi Sawan. He began to ask questions of powerful people. He was removed from the case. A second judge took over. His name was Tariq Bitar. He also began to ask questions. He was attacked. He was threatened. The investigation was blocked. Again, and again, and again. Years passed. By 2026, not one senior official had been put on trial. Not one minister. Not one person who could be called responsible. The families of the dead still go to the port every August. They light candles. They hold photographs. They ask for justice. And every August, no one answers. There is a kind of silence that is worse than any sound. It is the silence of accountability that never comes. After the explosion, the country needed leaders more than ever. But the leaders were busy fighting each other, and soon there were no leaders at all. Chapter 5. A Country Without a Captain. October 30th, 2022. A quiet night in Beirut. The Lebanese president, Michel Aoun, walked out of the presidential palace. His term was finished. He stopped at the door. He looked back at the building. Then he got into a car and drove away. Behind him, he left an empty chair. In Lebanon, the president must always be a Christian. The prime minister must always be a Sunni Muslim. The speaker of parliament must always be a Shia Muslim. This is the system. It is called the sectarian system, a system built on religious identity. It was designed to keep all communities in balance, to make sure no one group had too much power. But over many decades, this system was also used by politicians to protect their own power and their own money. It became a system of corruption. And on that October night, the corruption showed its true face. Because every group wanted a specific kind of president, and no group could agree with the others. Parliament met to elect a new president. They voted. No agreement. They met again. No agreement. Again. No agreement. 12 times they sat in the Parliament building. 12 times they went home without a president. This is called political paralysis. A country that cannot move forward. A country that cannot make decisions. A country that is stuck. Without a president, Lebanon had no full government. There was only a caretaker government, a temporary government with very limited power. A caretaker government can do the smallest basic things, but it cannot pass new laws. It cannot make big decisions. It cannot ask for money from international organizations. Lebanon had been trying to get financial help from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. The IMF is an organization that helps countries in economic crisis. But the IMF needed Lebanon to make serious reforms first. Without a real government, those reforms were impossible. The money never came. The Lebanese people felt completely abandoned by their leaders, and so the suffering continued. The electricity was still off for most of the day. The currency was still falling. The price of everything was still rising. Now, the most educated people in the country began to make a painful decision. They decided to leave. Doctors, engineers, teachers, young graduates with degrees and no future at home. In 2021, nearly 80,000 Lebanese people emigrated. They left Lebanon to live in another country. That was 4 times more than the year before. This is called the brain drain. When the most educated people leave a country, the country becomes weaker. The hospitals have fewer doctors. The schools have fewer teachers. The businesses have fewer engineers. A country losing its best people is a country losing its future. Layla's eldest son was one of them. He graduated with a degree in engineering. He found a job in Dubai. He packed his bags and left on a Wednesday morning. Layla drove him to the airport. She held his hand on the way. She did not cry until she was alone in the car. She understood. She told him to go. And then she drove back to Beirut, to her bank, where her savings were still frozen, to her apartment, where the electricity worked for 1 hour a day, to her school, where she still taught every morning, because someone had to stay, because not everyone can leave. There is one word for a country in this situation: not broken, not finished, not dead. The word is exhausted. And yet Lebanon was still here, still breathing, still choosing to live. Just like that grandmother on the Corniche who opens her cafe every morning. Just like Layla, who drives to school even when the road is broken. But while Lebanon was waiting for a president who never came, something was building on its southern border. A storm. One that would not wait for Lebanon to be ready. Chapter 6. The War Returns. In southern Lebanon, there is a village called Kfar Kila. It sits very close to the border with Israel. You can stand in the village square and see Israel on the other side. In the mornings, it is quiet, just birds and wind. On the morning of October 8th, 2023, it was different. The day before, in Gaza, far to the south, a Palestinian armed group called Hamas had attacked Israel. More than 1,000 people were killed in a single day. It was one of the deadliest attacks in Israel's history. Israel began bombing Gaza immediately. And then, at the Lebanese border, Hezbollah opened fire. Hezbollah said it was acting in solidarity with the Palestinian people. But who is Hezbollah? This is a question with more than one answer. Hezbollah is a political party. It has seats in the Lebanese parliament. Hezbollah is also an armed group, a militia, with weapons, fighters, and commanders. It runs schools and hospitals in southern Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley. And it receives money and weapons from Iran. Israel calls Hezbollah a terrorist organization. Most Western governments agree. But many Lebanese people, especially in the South, see Hezbollah differently. They see it as a resistance movement, one that protects them when their own government cannot. Both of these views exist. Both of these views are real. The truth, as always, is complicated. What is not complicated is what happened next. For more than 1 year, from October 2023 to September 2024, there was daily fire across the border. Hezbollah fired rockets, missiles, and drones into northern Israel. Israel responded with airstrikes across southern Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley. Hundreds of people were killed, on both sides, most of them civilians. Tens of thousands were forced to leave their homes in northern Israel, in southern Lebanon. Both sides called it retaliation. Both sides said the other one started it. The front lines moved a little this way, then a little that way, and the people on both sides lived in fear. Then, in September 2024, the situation escalated. On a Tuesday, thousands of small communication devices, called pagers, exploded at the same time across Lebanon. The devices were carried by Hezbollah members. Thousands were wounded. Dozens were killed. Israel did not officially take responsibility, but most analysts believe Israel planned the operation. Days later, Israel launched the largest airstrikes on Lebanon since 2006. Senior Hezbollah commanders were killed, one by one. And then, on September 27, 2024, Israel killed Hezbollah's most powerful leader. His name was Hassan Nasrallah. He had led the organization for more than 30 years. His death was a massive blow to Hezbollah. In October 2024, Israeli ground forces entered southern Lebanon. The invasion had begun. Villages were emptied. Buildings were destroyed. Civilians were displaced by the hundreds of thousands. On November 27, 2024, a ceasefire was announced. For a moment, people breathed. But the ceasefire was broken almost immediately. Israeli airstrikes continued in southern Lebanon nearly every day. Hezbollah accused Israel of violating the agreement. Israel said it was targeting Hezbollah regrouping. Between November 2024 and March 2026, more than 330 people were killed during a ceasefire. 330 people. By the start of 2025, Lebanon was completely exhausted. The economy was broken. The South was shattered. The people were tired of waiting for peace that kept arriving and then leaving again. But then, for the first time in years, something unexpected arrived. Not a bomb, not an airstrike, not another tragedy. A small piece of hope. Chapter 7. A new president, a new war. January 9th, 2025. The Parliament building in Beirut was full. Journalists waited outside in the cold. Families watched on their phones. An old woman in southern Lebanon sat in front of her television. She had not turned it on in weeks. Today, she turned it on. Inside, 128 members of Parliament were voting. And this time, finally, they agreed. 99 votes out of 128. The new president of Lebanon was Joseph Aoun. Joseph Aoun was not a politician. He was a soldier. For years, he had commanded the Lebanese army. He had kept the army out of politics and out of the war in the south. He was seen as honest, independent, and strong. He was not controlled by Hezbollah. He was not controlled by any other political group. He declared something that no Lebanese leader had said clearly in years. Only the Lebanese army should bear arms. Only the state has that right. This is what sovereignty means: the right of a country to control its own land and its own decisions. Days later, Nawaf Salam was named Prime Minister. Salam was a judge, a highly respected lawyer who had been president of the International Court of Justice, the highest legal court of the United Nations. Together, Aoun and Salam were what people call technocrats, leaders chosen for their skills and experience, not for their political party or religious community. Lebanon had not had leaders like this in a very long time. They promised reform. They promised to fight corruption. They promised to rebuild trust with the outside world. For a few months, small things changed. President Aoun flew to Saudi Arabia. For years, the Gulf states had stayed away from Lebanon because of Hezbollah and its alliance with Iran. Now, with a new president and a weakened Hezbollah, the Gulf was starting to re-engage. Money and support could return if Lebanon stayed on the right path. There was hope, fragile, careful hope, that the country was moving forward. But old habits were difficult to break. In March 2025, the new government appointed a new central bank governor who many analysts said was too close to the banking elite. Critics said real reform of the banks, the reform that Layla and millions like her needed, would not come. The savings would stay frozen. The system would protect itself. Even with new leaders, some things did not change. Then came the 28th of February, 2026. The United States and Israel launched a military operation against Iran. Iran had been Hezbollah's main supporter for decades, sending money, weapons, and fighters. Their alliance had kept Hezbollah strong through every conflict. Now Iran itself was under attack. In the strikes that followed, Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was killed. A supreme leader is the most powerful person in Iran. His death sent shock waves across the Middle East. Hezbollah, already weakened, already exhausted, had lost its most important ally. But it was not finished. Hezbollah began firing rockets into Israel again. And what followed was a rapid escalation. On March 2nd, 2026, Israeli forces returned to Lebanon. On March 16th, the ground operation began. Israeli troops crossed the border into the south. They occupied villages. They destroyed bridges. They cut roads. They emptied towns. 5 weeks of war followed. Airstrikes on Beirut. Airstrikes on the Bekaa Valley. Airstrikes across the south. By late April, more than 2,400 people had been killed. 7,000 more had been wounded. Over 1 million Lebanese, more than one person in every 5, had been displaced from their homes. Hundreds of thousands became refugees. people who had to leave everything behind and search for safety. 1 million people. The estimated damage to a country that was already broken, $11 billion. By the first week of April, the war had been going on for 5 weeks. Then, on a Tuesday night, the world announced a ceasefire. Lebanon breathed, just for a moment. By Wednesday morning, Lebanon would call that day by another name. Chapter 8, Black Wednesday. April 7th, 2026. A Tuesday night. In Beirut, in Sidon, in Tyre, in every village of the south, the news began to spread. A ceasefire. Pakistan had mediated between the United States and Iran. A 2-week truce was announced. Pakistan said the truce included Lebanon. Iran said the same, and Hezbollah signaled that it would stop firing rockets. In a Beirut apartment, Layla turned off the television and looked at her phone. Friends were sending messages. Is it true? Will it really stop? She made a cup of coffee. She opened the window. The city was quiet. For the first time in 5 weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a normal morning. She went to bed. April 8th, 2026. A Wednesday morning. At first, everything seemed peaceful. The sun rose over the Mediterranean. The fishermen pulled in their nets. The bakeries opened. And then, in 10 minutes, it all changed. Israeli fighter jets, 50 of them, struck more than 100 targets across Lebanon. Central Beirut, the southern suburbs, the Bekaa Valley, the cities of Sidon and Tyre. There was no warning. In a busy intersection in central Beirut, a place called Corniche al-Mazrah, the strikes hit during morning rush hour. People were on their way to work. Children were on their way to school. In a small village in the Bekaa Valley called Shmustar, a family was burying a loved one. A funeral was in progress at the village cemetery. An airstrike hit the cemetery. 10 people who were already mourning were killed. Most of the casualties were civilians. By evening, the numbers were almost too much to understand. 357 people dead. More than 1,100 wounded. The hospitals of Beirut were overwhelmed. Doctors called for blood donations. Ambulances could not move through the streets. Israel called it Operation Eternal Darkness. Israel said it had struck only Hezbollah targets. Lebanon called it something else. A massacre. President Joseph Aoun declared a national day of mourning. The country went silent. The world responded quickly. The Secretary General of the United Nations condemned the attack. The UN Human Rights Commissioner called it horrific. France called for Lebanon to be included in the ceasefire. Iran threatened that it would respond. For one short moment, Iran said it would close the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passage where so much of the world's oil passes through. Energy markets across the world watched in fear. On April 16th, 8 days after Black Wednesday, a new ceasefire for Lebanon was announced. This time, in writing. This time, the world watched closely. The bombs slowed, but they did not fully stop. Even after the ceasefire, Israeli strikes continued along the front line in the south almost every day. Hezbollah called the ceasefire meaningless, and the cycle continued. Strike, retaliation, condemnation, silence, then more. The morning after Black Wednesday. In a small bakery on a side street, a baker opened his shop. The bread had to be made. People still had to eat. On the corniche, a grandmother lifted the metal door of her cafe. She put out 2 chairs. She wiped the small table. A boy walked to school past a building that was not there the day before. He did not stop to look. He just walked. A fisherman pulled in his nets at sunrise, the same way he had done for 40 years. Layla drove to her school. There were fewer students that day, but there were still students. She taught them about adjectives, about commas, about verbs, because that was her job, and someone had to do it. This is Lebanon, a country that has lost so much, a country whose money has disappeared, a country whose port has exploded, a country whose government has paralyzed itself, a country whose south has been invaded again and again and again. And yet, a country that does not know how to disappear, a country that finds its dignity in small, ordinary actions, a country whose resilience is not a slogan on a wall. It is a baker at 4 a.m. It is a teacher in a half-empty classroom. It is a grandmother who wipes the same table every day in the same city, in the same morning light. A country quietly defiant against the silence of the world. This is where our story ends. But Lebanon's story is still being written. So we leave you with 3 questions. Will the next ceasefire hold? Will those responsible for the explosion, for the frozen banks, for the long war, ever be brought to justice? And what does it really mean, in our century, to be a country that refuses to disappear? We do not have the answers. But the people of Lebanon, every baker, every grandmother, every fisherman, every Layla, are writing those answers. One quiet morning at a time.
And with this, we come to the end of a very sad and tragic story of a country that, as I said in the beginning, was named Paris of the Middle East. It was a country that was very beautiful in the past, but now it's a country full of pain and suffering. We really hope the best for the Lebanese people. We really hope that peace will find its way to the people and the place itself, and also all the places where there is conflict. We really hope that peace will win in the end. Thank you so much for watching. Let us kindly remind you, if you would love to have this story that you listened to today in PDF format, you can just go to our website www.wooEnglish.com. You can download any story you find on our channel in PDF format. Don't forget, please, to like this video. That's your way of helping this channel grow. And finally, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. We meet again in another video. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in another story and another audiobook.